If we think of the world as a crime scene, and it was examined by a completely impartial and independent investigator, such as intelligent life from the planet Mars, what sort of questions would they ask, and what sort of evidence would they consider? I'm fairly certain that they would consider all types of evidence, of which the scientific evidence would be just a part. For example, after examining natural selection and agreeing that it runs itself, the Martian visitors should also widen their search and ask, how did it start, and is it hiding something else more important? The examination is easy, but asking why it's there in the first place is a lot more difficult. Or after examining human nature and agreeing that the human race appear to be trapped in an eternal cycle of self-destruction and war, the Martian visitors should also ask, why do humans also show care and love towards others, even for strangers? Self-destruction and war are obvious. Altruism and human consciousness are less obvious, but they are still a form of evidence and no less important. Death by natural selection is obvious and needs very little explaining, but the deaths of nearly 20,000 children every day because of malnutrition, disease, war and natural disasters since the dawn of civilization is not obvious, but needs a lot of explaining. Again, one is easy, the other very difficult. It could be explained by biology, evolution, or even social politics, but all these are helpless in explaining the absence of morality, fairness and justice. And if your own son or daughter died in hospital or in an accident, I don't think you will be looking at biology or evolution to find an explanation. But we must move on to the second point. We need to now get an idea of what Jesus tells us about hidden clues. Again, I choose a parable, and it follows on well from the Genesis parable, as it's all about rejection as well. It's in Matthew chapter 21. This parable is one of the most important teachings in the entire Bible, so I'm going to read it all and then spend some time examining it. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it, dug a wine press in it and built a watchtower. Then he rented a vineyard to some farmers and went away on a journey. When the harvest time approached, he sent his servants to the tenants to collect his fruit. But the tenants seized his servants. They beat one, killed another and stoned a third. Then he sent other servants to them, more than the first time, but the tenants treated them in the same way. Last of all he sent his son to them. Perhaps they will respect my son, he said. But when the tenants saw the son, they said to each other, "This is the heir. Come on, let's kill him and take his inheritance." So they took him and threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. So Jesus asked his listeners, when the owner of the vineyard comes back, what will he do to those tenants? The listeners replied, "Surely he will bring those wretches to a wretched end, and he will rent the vineyard to other tenants who will give him his share of the crop at harvest time." So don't forget that this is a parable and it has other meanings to it. For example, who is the landowner? Most likely it is God. Where is the vineyard? Answer, the earth and the work that we do on it. So who are the farmers and tenants? Every human being who has ever lived on that earth. Who are the servants? Every prophet, priest, king, scribe or average human being who tells others about God and in particular about the approaching harvest. Who is the son? Well, no prizes for that answer. But the most important question of all is, why are we tenants? Or why is God the landlord and not, say, the ruler or king, or as some people would say, sky dictator? Because presumably the landlord owns the land, and therefore we don't own the land or the work done in it, and presumably the landlord is not a sky dictator bent on revenge and eternal destruction, but like all reasonable landlords lets the people living in or on his property live in peace and without interference. I repeat, the earth does not belong to us. But did you notice this bit about the landlord going away? You probably missed it, so here it is again. If I said that these 6 words are important, I would be making the understatement of the year. Why does it agree with today's scientific facts that everything runs itself, and apparently God isn't needed? There are obviously many important points in this parable, so we really need to bring it up to date and recompose it from a 21st century point of view. There was a landlord who made planet Earth. He put a wall of protection around it with an atmosphere, other planets, stars, a sun and eventually a whole galaxy. The Earth is kept safely in constant orbit by the watchtower of universal gravity. Then he rented out the Earth by evolving life forms from microscopic cells. This took millions of years to happen, so he went away to look after the rest of the universe. After many millions of years had passed, the Earth was overflowing with life. Plants, trees, fish, birds and all manner of animals, including intelligent life, called humans. He was quite pleased with what he had done, so he decided to revisit the Earth and share in everything which had evolved over the few million years that he had been absent. But the humans preferred to worship sun gods, moon gods and rain gods, and rejected the real God. But the landlord was patient, and so he tried the human angle. He chose many and various good humans such as Abraham, Moses, David, Elijah, Daniel and many other prophets, so that they could pass on both good and bad news to everyone else. The message was the same: stop worshipping other gods and worship the Creator God. But the same thing happened to them. Humans still preferred their own idols of materialism and selfishness and carried on as if nothing had happened. Some of the prophets who were brave enough to shout a bit louder were dragged away and stoned to death. But the landlord was still patient, so he decided to send somebody rather special. In the same way as he had started life from a single cell of life in the womb of the earth many millions of years ago, he started a human life in the womb of a specially chosen human called Mary. But when this man had grown to an adult and began talking about himself and how he was sent to save the world, the humans put him to death as well. Humans killed the very person who had come to save them. This time the landlord had had quite enough. He immediately raised his son to life again, took him back to heaven and disappeared to take care of the rest of the universe. the humans had been warned, and they would be given a limited time to sort things out on planet Earth, after which time the landlord's son would return and sort it out personally. This is now like a science fiction novel, but you need to ask yourself a couple of important questions. Why is this parable still relevant today, when it's nearly 2,000 years old? Why do all the facts fit into place, especially the ones about the landlord going away, the world descending into chaos, and nobody believing that the landlord even exists? Would you trust what Jesus said in this parable? Is this another step towards enlightenment or not?